When it comes to 2010s EV designs, the first EV you think of is the Nissan Leaf. That's essentially one of the only examples people ever think of when they think of a early 2010s EV. Now, there's nothing wrong with the Leaf, but there's about 10 other early EVs that literally no one knows about, and that's what we're covering today, and I'm sure that if you're in the market for an EV, don't buy a Leaf. Buy one of these instead, because believe it or not, they are pretty interesting. So let's begin. I'm not even going to give any of it away. All that I'm going to give away is on the thumbnail. So, with that, let's begin. The Ford Focus EV. This weird guy was a Ford Focus hatch, exclusively the hatch, sold to the United States customers between 2012 and 2018. My favorite thing about it is the way that it looks. It looks like a frog giving you the Gen Z stare. Compared to the regular Ford Focus of that time, it looks weird, very fleshy. For some reason, they decided that 2 fake grills was enough and that they shouldn't include the 2 little fog lights down there, and they sculpted it to look weird. And it's kind of interesting to think that these 2 vehicles were sold at the exact same time, both in 2018. It's a big gap. In terms of practicality, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's your average hatchback, it's got 5 seats, it's got plenty of trunk space, even with the electric batteries, and it's not too bad, although there is a significant ledge in the back boot, of course, to fit the all-electric batteries. Not a hybrid batteries, all-electric batteries. Another thing that I appreciate is that Ford didn't make it look like an EV. They gave it nice wheels instead of the ugly, aero cover ones that EVs usually get. And if I look at it, I wouldn't really be able to tell it's an EV. Maybe just like a weird Ford Focus with a body kit. It doesn't scream, I'm an EV! They did this with hybrids, and they did it with EVs, and it was really annoying, plastering the word EV everywhere, or the abbreviation. Here are the specs. It had a 0 to 60 of about 10.7 seconds, which isn't fast, but isn't slow. And also, it had a J1772 port, which means you can, in fact, get an AX adapter, even though it'll still take about 7 to 8 hours to charge fully anyway. This next EV is another California compliance car. California introduced strict, climate change, climate control, issues and credits for car companies if they wanted to sell in their state. So a lot of car companies scrambled to make an EV, and that's really where all these came from. This one was also made by Honda just to meet that credit, clear all the California bullshit so that they could sell their cars in that state and make money off of the cars that actually mattered, like the regular Fit. Personally, I really like the styling of this car, and I like that silver bar that conjoins the 2 headlights. This is based off of the 2nd generation Fit, and they didn't really make it look too crazy EVE, but they did put the EVE-ness on the side, so I don't really appreciate that. But other than that, pretty good. I also really like the wheels, and also, it's 5 lug nuts. That is my favorite version of the Fit ever because it has 5 lug nuts. Seriously, Honda, you can do it. Just do it. It looks so much better. The Honda Fit EV was sold exclusively in California from the model years 2013 to 2015, about 3 model years. Here are the specs here. On a level 2 charger, it would take roughly 4 hours, which is pretty good. But on a standard 110-volt outlet, it would take about 20 hours, which is, I can say, less than ideal. This next car is kind of a weird one. If you know GM's EV history, this is by far the most nonsensical EV GM ever made. It's a Bolt EV, and they did a lot of weird stuff to make the EV battery pack fit in such a small car. They actually changed the rear suspension to take up less room so that they could fit a battery pack in this car. And speaking about EVification, this one, it's got the side skirts, it's light blue, it's got the issues. Yeah, they definitely EVified this one pretty bad on the outside. This car is pretty normal. It's not that EVE. It's actually a pretty decent car. A lot of, Bolt owners really like the Bolt EV. They say it's pretty nice. It's very comfortable to drive, although the rear suspension, I believe they say it's worse. Like, they don't like it as much compared to the regular Bolt. But a lot of people who really like the Bolt also really like the Bolt EV. So if you're a fan of Daewoo or, GM Korea or GM small car lineup, you like the Sonic, the Spark, the, God forbid, the Aveo, then you'll definitely like this too. Alright, here are the specs, and, everything is pretty good. This is also an insanely fast EV, and it's not that it's fast, like it's gonna, knock you out of your seat like a Tesla Plaid, but it is fun to drive, and the amount of torque, you have to keep in mind, this car is small, so just feeling the insane torque of that small little engine pull this car forward, supposedly, consulting with people, I actually know someone who owns a Bolt EV in Florida, happens to be my, neighbor across the street. That's actually what inspired this video. He says that it is the funnest car he has ever driven, ever, because of how how small it is, and how tall it is, and how terrifying it is to drive, in a good way. And also, you might not, notice this, and I'm just going to say this, for all the past cars and the cars at the present of this video, you might think, oh, well, none of these EVs are real, right? The Nissan Leaf was way ahead of its time, and just way ahead and, everything. That's not true. The 2010 Nissan Leaf, which is about when most of these cars were produced, had a range of like 85 miles. So 82 miles is like 2 miles less than the Leaf. So the Leaf isn't some bastion of quality or something. It's not like the reason why it went mainstream was because it was just so good. It was just the most achievable. It wasn't only sold in California. Nissan saw the potential. They sold it everywhere. If these cars had been sold there, the Nissan Leaf would be worthless. So these cars have good range too. That is, if you can find one. The Mitsubishi i-MiEV. This car, remember how I said that if all these vehicles had been sold in other places other than, California, that they would have sold well? This is an exception to that rule. The i-MiEV is, however, extremely notable because it has the worst wheels I have ever seen on a car ever, even on the ones in this list. There are a few numbers of spokes and lug nuts that don't go together, like 5 lug nuts and 4 spokes, or, 5 spokes and 4 lug nuts. They just don't look right. I think 3 and 4 is quite possibly the worst combo I have ever seen on any car wheel ever. And that little indentation, it looks like something out of a Roblox game. It's just so bad. This car also had shit ride quality because the wheels are huge. And not huge in like those wheels are super nice and diamond cut and big in an art statement. They're just big with small tires on a small car. So they're not big in size or anything. The tires are just small, so it rode like shit too. I mean, there's really very little redeeming qualities to this car, at least in my opinion. Weirdly, in the UK land, they got the Peugeot version of this. Now, if you're wondering how this came about, the two car companies partnered together for some things, and Peugeot got a few Mitsubishis, and this was one of them, and I just have to ask, why? And also with Mitsubishi, like a few other cars, they make it all EVE, and that's something that I complain about a lot. I just want a normal car that looks like a normal car, like a regular Toyota Corolla that I can't tell is an EV until, I drive it and no engine is there and no engine kicks on. This car is like the opposite of that. They made it too much just bad. I mean, they didn't make it look like an EV, but at the same time, it was hideous, and it was cheap, and it was plasticky, and it was crappy. All the attempts that ended up just making the car look like an EV freak for the other car companies was a genuine attempt at making the car look more attractive. I can't tell why Mitsubishi made this car the cheap way, and, just overall the way that they did this, even at all. It just doesn't make sense to me. And, I mean, I'm not trying to hate on this car, but I'm hating on this car. This car is useless. I mean, 59 to 62 miles is bad. The horsepower of 66 horsepower is bad. 0 to 60 of 13.5 seconds is bad. Top speed, 81 miles per hour, is okay, I guess, but I don't think you're ever going to be able to reach it. This is a car, when new from the dealership, was sold with having great tires. Yeah. The tire condition is great, though. Like that's always Facebook Marketplace. The first thing they put on that description of that 2012 Chevy Malibu is, it's got great tires. Now we move on to the Toyota RAV4 EV. This car has had 2 generations. The first generation sold from like 2001 to 2003, and then the second generation sold from like 2011 to 2014. And the second generation, we're not going to focus on the first generation. That's going to get a video of its own. This generation was actually made by Tesla. Not entirely by Tesla, but it had the battery pack and motor from a Model 3. Why? Well, because it was 2000, the early 2010s, and Tesla was strapped for cash, like every single car company that had just gotten out of the great, recession. So they were strapped for cash. Toyota needed a compliance car and a compliance car quickly. The first RAV4 EV was just kind of dicking around. The second RAV4 EV they needed because California was being annoying, which is what California often does. And I'm not saying this from a political standpoint, it's just California is very annoying when it comes to car safety regulations and stuff. Everyone says, well, the U.S. is behind on regulations. Look at California. And the best part is they're ahead in all of the wrong areas. This car is pretty interesting for a few reasons. First of all, the climate controls, and the interior is the most interesting thing about it. First of all, it has an almost all digital gauge cluster, and this gauge cluster was never replicated again in any Toyota vehicle ever. Something that was oddly, switched and shared with another car was the climate control, which was actually shared with a 2013 Toyota Avalon, which I find is like a weird little side quest. Also, this had the best Toyota RAV4, interior of any car, of any RAV4 of this generation, mainly because in front of the vents, like in between the two vents, they didn't have a hazard switch. In fact, in most cases, they had nothing. Now, they actually put the vent closers in the middle, because the other ones were so cheap, they didn't have vent closers. Can you imagine that? A Toyota with no vent closers, especially RAV4. Only the V6s and some higher trims got them. This, it did get them. Unfortunately, it does kind of look like Voldemort, but hey, things are going to be. And I think this is genuinely the best interior a RAV4 has ever had of this generation. Also, let's get to the specs. This had a sport mode where it could go 0 to 60 in 7 seconds, which, again, Tesla. I'm only going to say Tesla. This was front-wheel drive. It was pretty good, very torquey. Again, this is a fantastic find if you can find one. And then there was a standard charge and extended charge. The standard charge had 92 miles, and the extended charge had 113, which was more than the Nissan Leaf during the same amount of time. Yeah, pretty cool. The VW e-Golf is probably my favorite EV on this entire list. It looked like a regular Golf. The numbers are still strong. You can still find it and buy it today, but it hides a dirty little secret. This is a Volkswagen through and through. It was made in Germany, at least the battery pack was, and it was good. Except for the fact that to make it, Volkswagen licensed technology from the Nissan Leaf. Ding, 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 ringing the bell. Fake Nissan Leaf, fake, 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 fake. They did make the battery pack in Germany. It is a Volkswagen Golf, and the only reason why this is so widely accessible today, this is as accessible, if not more accessible, than a Nissan Leaf in the 48 continental United States, is because Volkswagen wanted to support this. They wanted to treat it like a real Golf, and in the ZEV areas, they really treated it well. They had an extensive dealer network, they had a fantastic warranty, and that's the only reason why this one stuck out more and for as long as it did compared to the other ones, because the car company didn't want to brush this under the rug as soon as they had made it. Nice job, VW, you did something great. Another reason why they made this wasn't just, for the EV mandate. Not really for the mandate, but, restrictions on emissions. The reason why they did that, and needed an EV was also because of Dieselgate. The only thing that was giving them those credits, and the only thing that was giving them, yay, performance good boy points for the people was their diesels, their clean diesels, clean being the word there. And when they found out that they weren't so clean, they needed something else. Yes, alright, so the 2017 Golf specs were pretty good, actually. 125 miles of range, which was pretty much the same as the Nissan Leaf at the time. Wonder why. 134 horsepower, nothing to write home about, but, nothing sad either. It also has a 0 to 60 of 9.6 seconds, which, compared to the iMIAV, is like Rocket Man. I mean, that is, impressively quick. Alright, well now it's time to talk about the EV that I like that I wouldn't traditionally like, and that's the Kia Soul EV. This thing is weird, but it actually makes a fantastic electric vehicle. I think that the Kia Soul is such a fantastic platform for an EV. First of all, it's boxy. I love boxy cars that are, very sculpted in the front and very boxy around the back because you get the most cargo room. Having a slanted rear like, the Impreza hatches, you lose out on cargo space, and the aerodynamics that you get from it aren't really worth it. This is perfect. It is a box. You can fit as much as you want in the back, and because it's a box, it has a flat floor, perfect for fitting batteries in. You want to know what? I'm not a fan of the Kia Soul. I think they're bad with reliability. I think they're not traditionally fantastic vehicles, but you want to know what? I love this Kia Soul. This is by far my favorite Soul Kia has ever made. The Soul EV first started production in 2014 as a 2015 model year, and then ceased production in 2019 after the second release of the Kia Soul EV Gen 2 based off of the newer generation Kia Souls. But, however, this new generation was only sold in Europe and Korea, so we don't get it here in America land. I genuinely do like this Kia Soul. It's got a nice interior, they upgraded it a little bit, heated seats. I think that if you drive a Kia Soul, and if you drive this Kia Soul, this might be as good as a Toyota. I'm just saying that. I think the EV, they've proven to be reliable vehicles. I like the form factor. I don't hate it. Now, in terms of stuff, it's not really good, except for the range. 120 to 124 is a lot better than all the other EVs on this list. They've all been getting 84, 85 in the low 100s. 124... it's a usable electric vehicle. The batteries also apparently have been really good on these with not degrading. And, for the horsepower, it's got 109 horsepower and 0 to 60 under 12 seconds. It's kind of like my Prius, it's pretty fine. And it's got a top speed of 90 miles per hour, which means it is feasibly usable in American highways. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about this one because I think it's by far the least interesting out of all the vehicles on this list, but there's a Toyota IQ EV, or also the Scion IQ EV as we know it here in the United States. It's fine. I don't know why I specifically attain the trait of, like, not really favorability or uselessness to this car. It's just kind of lazy. It's a small car. You can fit a battery pack in it. It's okay. There's nothing unagreeable here, but there's really nothing, substantial. It's just kind of Toyota meh, nothing too special here. It doesn't really stand out in any way, shape, or form. And it doesn't help that it's just a terrible EV. I mean, 50 miles of range is, like, worse than a Wego Life. And that was just, like, a cheap little once-off Georgia Chinese EV. You know what I mean? For the top speed of being 78 miles per hour, that's not really impressive. 63 horsepower is slow, and it's not really fun to drive either. So, yeah, not great. This next one is another car that I would say isn't really remarkable, since they still sell it today. But what is notable about the first generation Fiat 500e is that they lost $13,000 on every single unit sold. This car, it's fine. On the outside it looks fine. The interior is fine. The main reason why it's on this list, because, again, these are all of it. I'm not just saying that, this is only some of them, like the ones that I felt talking about. This is genuinely every single weird compliance car that I could find. The only really notable things about it is losing $12,000 or $12,000 to $13,000 on every single model sold. The CEO begging people to not buy the car. That's remarkable. And also, look at the shifter. They sloppily replaced the manual or automatic transmission that standard came on the Fiat 500 with this ugly push button thing, and it doesn't work at all. But at least with a small EV, Fiat actually figured out how to make an EV, unlike the Toyota IQ, which was one of the worst cars Toyota's ever made, actually. Not the IQ itself, but the IQ EV. This car has 111 horsepower, which is way better. Torque, pretty good. 0 to 60, 8.2 to 8.7 seconds. That's a lot better than 13. 13 seconds, it's a long time when you're flooring it, And the range, 80 miles with often over 100 miles for city. That's not half bad. That's dare I say, pretty usable. And now it's time to talk about my second favorite, the Mercedes-Benz B-Class electric drive. This is another Tesla amalgamation. Again, Tesla was really strapped for cash in the, after the market crash. So other companies were, like, contracting them out and say, hey, give us your Model S battery pack and motors, and we'll give you some monies. And they did that, and this is one of those cars, and this thing is really cool. Everybody on the face of the planet that's kind of a car guy has an idea in their head of what EVs should be. Some people think that EVs should be nothing, some people think that EVs should be everything, and some people have an idea about the form factor. This is what I think EVs should be. They're either small and efficient, or they're nice, big, juicy, lumpy, filled with batteries, and boxy. This is fantastic. You could fit your entire family in it. There's plenty of space for the batteries in the bottom. You're not trying to cram it into a car, because you've got that flat bottom. You've got plenty of trunk space. You're maxing out the efficiency. Interior room and exterior style and design. I think it's perfect. The interior is nice, and also it doesn't have a lot of features, at least on the base models, that would eat up on your range. So yeah, I mean, this, I would say, is what I think modern-day EVs should look like. As much efficient as possible, whether that be via range or efficiency or size and shape. Alright, I really like it. The specs are pretty good, 60 miles of range in under 2 hours. That's not bad. All of these have the J1772 port, so you can just slap a NAX onto that. It won't charge fast or supercharge or anything, but you can, it's still usable. 0 to 60 is pretty good. Horsepower, good, and the range, approximately 85 miles. Again, it has the same range as the other cars, except you get so much more out of it. This isn't really that much bigger than the Golf, except it feels bigger because of the shape of it. I love this car. And now on to probably the weirdest one and the last one of this list. The BYD E6 was brought in extremely small numbers to California for rental fleet testing. They had over 185 miles of range, 0 to 60 in about 8 seconds flat, and, they were pretty good. They are still used as taxis today, although many of them have been destroyed, Pretty good, actually. I just think this is weird. You can do your own research on this, because I'm not going to, go into super detail, because I need to do my outro and monologue, but it's cool that it's on this list, and that no one knows about it. Well, I really enjoyed making this video, and I hope you enjoyed learning about these compliance cars. And you may say, well, why are there more EVs than hybrids? Because none of these were hybrids, but I'm just saying in general, there were more EVs from weird car brands than there were hybrids, and that's because hybrids are hard to deal with. No one wants to, lease you the technology. No one wants to, you have to develop your own. With EVs, you can go out to Tesla, especially during the early 2000s, and, lease their system. So that made it a lot easier for these car companies to get their foot in the door, like Volkswagen, no matter how hard they deny it, with the Leaf, and, the Toyota and Mercedes with Tesla. Anyway, with that, thank you for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon.